Hey friends, haven't done this in a while, but I was just practicing some Ravel, and I had a lesson with Madeline earlier, and it opened me up to some sound, a sense of sound. And then I just started putting my hands on the piano, and I started hearing things, and I thought it would be maybe something I could share. So this is not a piece as much as it's me exploring sound, having kind of just ingested this beautiful piece. Oiseau Triste is the Ravel piece I've been working on. It's a bird song, or a number of birds' songs. But what started to come through for me something that I think wanted to come through. I had a pretty powerful flash come through earlier today, because I think, I don't know about a lot, but I think every once in a while about the relationship between spiritual practice and politics, the realm of politics and human, which is kind of the realm of human institutional evolution, right? The rules we make for ourselves, how we decide and describe the kind of society we want to live in. And what caught my attention this morning, I was reading a New York Times article about Russian trolling, election meddling, but not so much that. In this case, it was more undermining movements in our country and sowing dissent / exacerbating dissent that's already there. And it really sparked for me a sense of this intersection between spiritual practice and our political life. Because if we look around right now, one of the primary things we see is on all sides, and with regard to with fewer and fewer exceptions, we see outrage and indignation becoming the main response that we have to not even necessarily disagreement, just any expression or position that the other side might take. And what I experience as someone who observes this with alarm is the kind of increasing narrowing of each of our perspectives. Our perspectives collapse from being shared worldviews and from being structures that we feel like we are creating in community. They collapse down into little cubicles of our perspective, our opinion, because it seems so threatening. Everyone else, the idea, and this is, the article I was reading this morning was largely talking about how social media started this trend, and these problems were already there, but they're very easy to exploit. And it's very easy to sort of nudge groups that are, whether if there's already a sense of dissent in a community like the United States population, it's pretty easy to just throw a couple little depth charges in there and inflame people's indignation. And before you know it, that little provocation that you've dropped in there to nudge people into indignation and outrage has disappeared, because now the actual catalyst for our division is us. It's not it's not that the wedge was driven and the wedge drove us apart. The wedge is almost invisible. The wedge just becomes this invisible knife that cuts us from one another. It severs our ability, our willingness to engage in a way that could potentially be constructive. Maybe it wouldn't always be, almost certainly it wouldn't always be, but we don't even try. We just go straight to indignation and outrage. And it's such a sad predicament in a country and in a community that I think is almost founded on the idea of that kind of dialogue, and really so much of what certainly I treasure about American culture is the fact that it is this melting, this place where different influences can come together and communicate. So, where I'm coming around to with all of this, in spiritual practice, in the practice of mindfulness, indignation is a sign of compulsive behavior. It's a sign that we are not consciously responding. We're responding unconsciously. And that's whether it's political or cultural or just in our household, on whatever level, that's what it means. And and as we do more and more of this work, it becomes really kind of apparent that that's a big deal, and we need to reckon with that. We need to work with that. We need to work with our own compulsive responses, first by becoming aware of them, and then little by little, by actually deliberately frustrating them, by deliberately arresting our impulses before they can fulfill the cycle, which is just kind of like spinning the merry-go-round again. Every time we fulfill one of those impulses, it's like we add a little more momentum to that merry-go-round, because it's going to come around again and it's going to ask us, are we still want to be on this ride? Okay, here we go. And we spin it again. So I really came to this place where, this morning, I really came to this place by both reading this article and then kind of just reflecting a little bit, where I realized what a huge opportunity we have if we're involved in a spiritual practice and if we're cultivating an awareness of these patterns. What a huge opportunity it is to not allow ourselves to become indignant, no matter what. And I'm not saying that there's not Madeline used the phrase, I think she called it empathetic wrath, which was open-hearted energy, but directed in a fiery way. It's not that we don't need that as well, but the idea that indignation is our response is tearing us apart, and it's a weapon. It's our own indignation is a weapon that is being used against us, and when we know that, if we imagine that weapon being directed at the people we love, if we imagine that every time I feel indignation, I'm using a weapon against the people I love. Because of course, what we think we're doing is we're pointing that at somebody that we don't love. We're pointing that at somebody who deserves it. We're pointing it at somebody who needs to be undermined and stopped and at all costs wiped out. But what's really happening is we're pointing it at the people we love, because it obliterates the opportunity we have for another response that might actually go somewhere, that might actually take us somewhere. So that to me was a kind of epiphany, because I don't often do political posts, and I don't really want to, because my focus is not on that. My focus is on inner work, personal work, and inner work in community, but not on political ideology or activity. But I couldn't help but notice the link this morning between that kind of inner cultivation of non-compulsive responses, non-compulsive consciousness, and our cultural political sphere. So I'm offering that to myself as a way of engaging, and to anyone else who might find that compelling. Yeah. That's what I got today, folks. Thanks for watching. Much love. I'll see you tomorrow.